The sun had barely risen when Jack Lucas Taylor was already carrying the third bag of feed on his shoulders. At 22, his muscles had the endurance of someone who had known hard work since childhood, but his eyes held dreams that seemed too big for someone of his condition. Fairview, his small hometown in Kentucky, was slowly awakening to the sound of roosters and the morning bustle of local businesses. "Jack, my son, you're going to break your back carrying those bags alone," said Martha Taylor, drying her hands on her damp apron after spending the entire early morning washing clothes in the tub. She watched her son with that maternal gaze that mixed pride and concern. "Why don't you get some boys to help you?" "Mom, you know I can't afford to pay helpers. Besides, this work keeps me strong," Jack replied, forcing a smile as he arranged the last bag in Mr. Anthony's storage room. Sweat ran down his forehead, but he showed no sign of fatigue. The truth was that Jack saved every penny he earned for a dream he had never dared to tell his mother. Every afternoon when he finished work, he would hide behind the fence of Colonel Hank Morgan's horse ranch to watch the racehorses. He knew each animal by name, recognized their distinctive markings, and secretly dreamed of one day riding one of them. "Good morning, Martha. Good morning, Jack," greeted Rachel Morgan, the Colonel's daughter, who was passing by with her elegant posture and simple dress made of fine fabric. She always greeted the townspeople politely, unlike her father, who barely looked at those he considered beneath him. "Good morning, Miss Rachel," mother and son responded almost in unison. Jack felt his face grow slightly warm. Rachel was 20 years old, with brown hair that shone in the sunlight and a gentle smile that contrasted with the typical coldness of the Morgan family. The church bell struck 9 when Colonel Hank Morgan appeared in the town square mounted on his bay horse. His imposing presence made conversation cease instantly. Tall, with a well-trimmed grey mustache and leather hat, he embodied power and authority in Fairview. "Attention, people of Fairview!" he shouted, in a voice that echoed around the houses surrounding the square. "As you all know, our traditional annual race takes place in 2 weeks. This year, I've decided to open a special spot for someone from town to show if they have the fiber to compete with real horsemen." A murmur of curiosity took over the small crowd that had formed. Jack felt his heart racing, but he didn't dare move closer. He stood watching from a distance, clenching his fists nervously. And this opportunity goes to... The Colonel made a dramatic pause, his eyes scanning the anxious faces. "Jack Lucas Taylor." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack felt his legs weaken and was sure he had misheard. Martha brought her hand to her chest, unable to believe what she was hearing. "That's right, folks. The washerwoman's son will have his chance at glory," continued the Colonel with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tomorrow morning, Jack, come to my ranch to meet your horse. Let's see if those feed-carrying muscles also work for riding." Some people laughed quietly. Others just shook their heads in disbelief. Jack knew that this wasn't generosity. He knew Colonel Hank well enough to suspect his true intentions. Even so, a flame of hope lit up in his chest. "My son, are you sure you want to accept?" whispered Martha, pulling him away from the crowd. "That man doesn't do anything out of kindness. I'm afraid it's just a trap to humiliate us publicly." Jack looked at his mother, then at the square where the Colonel was still talking with other local farmers. His childhood dreams, silently kept for so many years, now had a real opportunity to come true. Even if it was a trap, he couldn't waste what might be the only chance he would ever have in his life. "Mom, this has been my dream since I was little. If I don't try now, I'll regret it forever." If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. Dawn arrived without Jack managing to get a wink of sleep. He tossed and turned on his straw mattress, imagining which horse the Colonel would give him. Would it be one of the young colts? Perhaps one of the training animals? His dreams oscillated between fantasies of victory and nightmares of public humiliation. "Jack, wake up. The sun has risen and you need to be at the ranch early," called Martha, gently shaking her son's shoulder. She had spent the entire night praying that everything would turn out well. The path to the Morgan ranch never seemed so long. With each step, Jack felt his stomach churn with nervousness. Some neighbors leaned out their windows to watch him, past whispering comments he preferred not to hear. The news had spread throughout, saw the entire town during the night. "Look at that. The boy with big dreams going to fetch his disappointment," muttered the baker, making others laugh. "Poor Martha. It's going to be hard watching her son be embarrassed in front of the whole town," commented a lady at the grocery store door. Jack clenched his fists but kept walking. Arriving at the ranch gate, he was greeted by Pete, the foreman, who took him to the back of the property, far from the main stables where the champion horses were kept. "Colonel told me to wait for you here," said Pete, pointing to an isolated, small corral. "Your horse is over there." Jack looked in the indicated direction and felt his heart sink in his chest. In the corner of the corral, almost hidden in the shadow, was a grey horse with a pitiful appearance. Too thin, with dull and lusterless coat, the animal barely raised its head when Jack approached. Its right hind leg visibly trembled, and its ribs were clearly visible under the skin. This is my horse?" asked Jack, trying to hide the shock in his voice. "Yes, it is. The colonel said his name is Windrunner," Pete replied with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. "Poor beast's been like this for more than 2 years. Nobody really knows what happened to him." Jack slowly approached the animal. Windrunner raised his head, and for an instant their eyes met. It was strange, but in that tired gaze, there was something Jack couldn't explain, a silent dignity that contrasted with his debilitated physical appearance. "Hello, Windrunner," Jack whispered, slowly extending his hand. The horse sniffed his palm, a simple gesture that stirred something in the young man's chest. "Jack, I see you've met your great champion," Colonel Hank's sarcastic voice echoed through the corral. He was approaching, accompanied by 2 local farmers, all laughing at the situation. "Colonel, are you sure this horse can compete?" asked Jack, trying to maintain his composure. "Of course he can. Windrunner was once one of the best in this region," the colonel replied with a cruel smile. "What happens is that you'll need to work a bit to get him in shape. After all, you didn't expect me to give you everything on a silver platter, did you?" The farmers laughed even louder. Jack felt his face burn with shame, but he didn't look away from the colonel. He knew exactly what was happening. This was a planned humiliation, a way to put him in his place in front of the entire town. "How long do I have to prepare him?" asked Jack, surprising everyone with his determination. 2 weeks, as I said." "Yesterday. The race will be next Sunday after church," replied the colonel, no longer laughing. "But Jack, if you think you're not up to the challenge, you can give up now. No one will blame you for recognizing your limitations." "I won't give up," Jack said firmly. "Windrunner and I will be at the starting line." The silence that followed was tense. The colonel hadn't expected that response, and for a moment he seemed genuinely surprised. Pete observed everything with interest while the farmers exchanged incredulous looks. "Very well then," the colonel finally said. "Pete will give you the rope and the old saddle. The rest is up to you. Oh, and Jack," he made a dramatic pause, "I hope you don't cause too much embarrassment for your family." After the men walked away, Jack was left alone with Windrunner. The horse approached slowly, visibly limping but with his eyes fixed on the young man. Jack extended his hand again, and this time Windrunner touched it with his muzzle, as if establishing a silent pact between them. "I don't know what happened to you, Windrunner, but I promise you one thing," whispered Jack, stroking the animal's neck. "We're going to prove to this town that they're wrong about us. It may not look like it now, but I see something special in your eyes." Windrunner whinnied softly, a hoarse sound that seemed to carry years of sadness. Jack realized at that moment that they had something in common. They were both underestimated by everyone around them, considered inferior, but carried within themselves a strength that no one else could see. The walk back home was different. Even with the heavy saddle on his shoulder and the rope in his hand, Jack felt a determination growing in his chest. Windrunner followed him slowly, limping but never stopping. "Good heavens, Jack, what horse is that?" exclaimed Martha when she saw her son arriving with Windrunner. She dropped the basin of wet clothes and ran to the gate. "That animal is sick, boy." "Mom, I know he doesn't look like much now, but—" Jack began to explain, but was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Windrunner, is that really you? My old friend?" Old Frank Walters was approaching, walking slowly, leaning on his wooden cane. At 75, the former ranch hand and horse trainer was a living legend in Fairview. His experienced eyes sparkled as he recognized the animal. "You know this horse?" asked Jack, surprised by the old man's reaction. "Know him? Boy, I helped train this horse when he was a colt," said old Frank, carefully approaching Windrunner. "Let me check something here." The old man squatted with difficulty and examined the animal's legs. Windrunner, who until then had seemed apathetic, raised his head with interest, as if recognizing the familiar touch. "Jack, do you know what horse this is?" asked old Frank, with a grave voice and wide eyes. "The colonel said his name is Windrunner. That's all." "That's all?" Old Frank laughed bitterly. "My son, this was the fastest horse that ever set foot on these lands. Windrunner was the pride and joy of the late Elizabeth Morgan, the colonel's wife." Martha moved closer, intrigued. Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. "What do you mean, old Frank? What's this story?" The old trainer leaned against the makeshift fence that Jack had built in the backyard and began to speak with a nostalgic voice. Elizabeth Morgan was different from her husband. She truly loved horses, not for status or money, but for the beauty and nobility of these animals. Windrunner was her personal horse, and together they won every regional race for 3 straight years. "And what happened to him?" asked Jack, stroking Windrunner's neck. "When Miss Elizabeth passed away about 2 years ago, the colonel was overwhelmed with grief. Some say he couldn't bear to see Windrunner because the animal reminded him too much of his wife. One day, Windrunner simply disappeared from the main stables. We thought the colonel had sold him, or—" Old Frank paused, looking at Windrunner with pity. "Or that he had ordered the animal to be put down," Martha completed in a low voice. "Apparently, he just left him abandoned in the back corral," said old Frank, shaking his head sadly. "Look at these scars on his legs, Jack. They're marks from special horseshoes, the kind only used on championship racehorses." Jack knelt to examine the marks the old man was pointing out. Indeed, there were small circular scars on Windrunner's legs, signs of horseshoes that had been removed long ago. "But old Frank, if he was once a champion, why is he in this state?" asked Jack. "Horses are like people, son. When they lose their reason for living, they waste away. Windrunner hasn't been trained or ridden in 2 years. Plus, I bet he's barely been getting proper food. But look here." Old Frank pointed to the horse's chest and legs. "The structure is still good. This horse was born to run." Windrunner, as if understanding the conversation, whinnied softly and touched old Frank's shoulder with his muzzle. The old man smiled and stroked the animal affectionately. "He remembers me," he murmured emotionally. "How many mornings we spent together in the training ring, right, Windrunner? Old Frank, do you think he can run again?" asked Jack with growing hope in his voice. The old man examined Windrunner more thoroughly, observing his movements, feeling his muscles, and checking his breathing. "Jack, I won't lie to you. It's going to be difficult. He's thin, weak, and that hind leg has a tendon problem, but—" He made a dramatic pause. "If someone can make this horse remember who he was, we might still have a surprise ahead." "What do you mean?" asked Martha. "A champion horse never completely forgets how to run. It's instinct, it's in the blood. The problem is that Windrunner has lost his will. If Jack can rekindle that flame, who knows?" At that moment, Windrunner approached Jack and rested his head on his chest, a gesture that made the young man's heart race. It was as if the animal was saying he trusted him. "Old Frank, would you help me care for him?" asked Jack with determination. "Son, at 75, I can't do heavy work. But I can teach you everything I know about how to treat a champion horse, and I can tell you stories about when Windrunner was the king of the tracks." Martha, who had listened to everything in silence, approached the three. "Jack, my son, now, I understand why you didn't want to give up. This horse has a story, a dignity. You were made for each other." As the sun set that afternoon, old Frank began to teach Jack the first special care that Windrunner would need. For the first time since he had awakened that morning, Jack felt that perhaps his decision hadn't been just an impossible dream. Windrunner, for his part, seemed more alert, as if old Frank's words had awakened old memories of glory that had been sleeping in his heart. The first days of caring for Windrunner were more challenging than Jack had imagined. Following old Frank's guidance, he would wake up before dawn to prepare a special mixture of oats, chopped carrots, and honey. When he could afford to buy it, to try to awaken the animal's appetite. "Come on, Windrunner. You need to eat to get strong," Jack would murmur, holding the bucket close to the horse's muzzle, but Windrunner would just smell the food and move away, refusing most meals. "Patience, Jack," old Frank advised, during his daily visits. "A traumatized horse takes time to trust again. Keep offering, eventually he'll accept." On the third morning, something changed. Jack was cleaning the small shelter of wood and canvas that he had improvised when he heard a different sound. Windrunner was eating. Slowly, chewing carefully, but finally accepting the food. "Mom! Mom, come see!" shouted Jack, excited. "Windrunner is eating." Martha ran to the backyard, drying her hands on her apron. Seeing the horse feeding, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank God, my son, it seems he's starting to trust you." What Jack didn't know was that every morning, even before the sun rose, a female figure silently approached his house. Rachel Morgan observed from a distance the care he devoted to Windrunner, and her heart ached, seeing the condition of her stepmother's former horse. Elizabeth had been like a second mother to Rachel, who lost her own mother at a very young age. The mornings she spent alongside her stepmother, watching her train with Windrunner, were among her most precious memories. Seeing the horse in that state was a dagger in her heart. "Tommy, I need a favor from you," Rachel said to old Frank's younger brother's son when she met him in the square. "Of course, Miss Rachel. What do you need?" "I want you to deliver this to Jack Taylor, but without saying who sent it," she said, handing him a small package. "These are special vitamins and supplements for horses. Say that a passing merchant left them for him. Understand?" Tommy nodded, intrigued but asking no questions. He had known Rachel since childhood and knew she had a kind heart, unlike her father. When Jack received the mysterious package, he was confused. "Vitamins for horses." "But who?" he began to ask, but Tommy had already quickly walked away. "Must be someone who feels sorry for the animal," commented Martha. "Or perhaps God is sending help." Jack took the package to old Frank, who examined the supplements with interest. "Jack, these vitamins are expensive. Very expensive. Whoever sent this knows horses well and has money," said the old man, shaking his head thoughtfully. "But what luck. It's exactly what Windrunner needs to regain his strength." In the following weeks, the routine was established. Jack worked during the day carrying feed bags, but dedicated every morning and night to Windrunner. Following old Frank's instructions, he massaged the horse's legs with a mixture of herbs and clay, an ancient technique that the old trainer had learned from his grandfather. "This is for the inflamed tendon," explained old Frank, showing how to make circular movements on Windrunner's hind leg. "My grandfather taught me that a horse is like a guitar. You have to tune the right strings to make the music flow." Windrunner began to show signs of improvement. His coat, albeit slowly, was gaining more shine. The animal would softly whinny whenever he saw Jack approaching, and his hind leg trembled less during the short walks they took around the yard. "You know, Windrunner," Jack would talk during the nights he slept on the floor of the shelter to keep the animal company, "I know what it feels like to be invisible. All my life people have looked at me as if I was worth nothing, but I believe that we both have something special." One night, Windrunner did something that surprised Jack. The horse approached and lay down beside him, resting his head on his arm. It was a gesture of absolute trust that brought tears to the young man's eyes. "Elizabeth used to do that with him," said a soft voice in the darkness. Jack got up startled and saw Rachel Morgan standing on the other side of the fence, wrapped in a shawl. "Miss Rachel, what are you doing here at this hour?" "I couldn't sleep. Sometimes I come here to remember her," Rachel said with a choked voice. "My stepmother would spend hours talking to Windrunner, exactly as you do." "Your stepmother?" "Elizabeth, she raised me after my real mother and passed away. Windrunner was special to her. They were soul partners." Rachel moved closer to the fence, and in the moonlight, Jack could see tears in her eyes. "Jack, I need to tell you something. It was I who convinced my father to give you this opportunity. I thought that maybe Windrunner needed someone who believed in him again." You sent the vitamins too, didn't you? Rachel nodded shyly. I sold a necklace that my stepmother left me. I couldn't bear to see Windrunner wasting away like this. He deserves one last chance to be who he always was. Jack was moved by the revelation. Windrunner, as if understanding the conversation, stood up and approached Rachel, touching her hand with his muzzle through the fence. He remembers you, Jack said softly. And I never forgot him, Rachel replied, stroking the horse affectionately. Take care of each other, Jack. You were meant to be together on this journey. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. 1 week before the race, the town of Fairview was buzzing with preparations, and especially with betting. In Mr. Joaquin's grocery store, in Joe Benton's bar, and even at the church door, the subject was always the same: Jack Taylor and Windrunner's participation in the annual race. $5 says the horse won't even leave the starting line. Bet the blacksmith pounding his fist on the grocery counter. I'll give 10 that Jack quits before the race even starts, laughed the pharmacy owner. Poor boy. He's getting himself into trouble that won't end well, murmured Miss Antonia, the town midwife. Jack heard these comments when he passed through the streets, but tried to stay focused on Windrunner. The horse had improved significantly in recent weeks. His coat had gained shine, his eyes showed vivacity again, and his hind leg didn't tremble as much. During morning walks, Windrunner would even give small gallops, as if old racing memories were awakening in his blood. Look at that, old Frank, Jack said emotionally one morning, watching Windrunner trot around the yard. He's remembering how to run. Yes, boy, the instinct is coming back, agreed the old trainer, smiling. But Jack, I need to warn you about something. The whole town is making fun of you two. People are betting how many yards you'll manage to go before stopping. Let them laugh, old Frank. When the race comes, they'll see. That's right, Jack. But remember what I always say. A horse feels the rider's nervousness. On race day, you need to be calm and confident. Windrunner will mirror your feelings. That same afternoon, Jack was carrying feed bags when he was surprised by the imposing presence of Colonel Hank Morgan. The man appeared mounted on his bay horse, blocking the path. Jack Taylor, I need to talk to you, said the colonel in a grave voice. Yes, Colonel. Listen carefully to what I'm going to say, boy. This joke has gone far enough. The entire town is laughing at you, your family, and by extension at me, too. Nobody takes our annual race seriously anymore because of you. Jack felt his blood boil but tried to maintain his composure. Colonel, you gave me this opportunity. I didn't ask for it, but I accepted. Now I'm going to see it through. Opportunity? The colonel laughed with disdain. Jack, that was a lesson in humility. You were supposed to realize it wasn't your place and give up. But you, stubborn as a mule, insist on this charade. Windrunner is no charade, Colonel. He was once a great champion. Colonel Hank's face hardened at hearing the name. Don't mention that name, he shouted, making his horse take a few nervous steps. You have no right to talk about things you don't understand. Jack realized he had touched a deep wound. The E. Colonel took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. Jack, I'm going to make you an offer. Give up this race now and I'll arrange a better job for you on my farm. You can even bring your mother to work in the main house. You'll have a dignified life. And if I don't accept? The colonel smiled coldly. You know the land where your mother lives? That humble little house where you live? Well, I am the legal owner of that land. I have the documents registered in the courthouse for more than 10 years. Your mother lives there out of, let's say, my tolerance. Jack felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He had never questioned the situation of the house where they had lived since he was a child. What are you trying to say, sir? I'm saying that if you insist on this charade and cause more embarrassment for my family and my race, I'll have to charge the overdue rent for all these years, or else you can look for another place to live. The threat echoed in the air. Like thunder, Jack clenched his fists, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. But, Colonel, my mother has always paid the taxes on the house. She has the receipts. Municipal taxes are one thing, Jack. Private property is another. That land has been mine since I bought it from the previous owner in debt execution. You can check at the courthouse if you want." The colonel turned his horse around, but before riding away he added, "You have until tomorrow to decide. Either you accept my job offer and forget this race business, or you prepare your mother to look for another place to live. The choice is yours." Jack stood in the middle of the street watching the colonel ride away. Some people who had witnessed the conversation from a distance whispered among themselves, but no one approached. When he got home, he found Martha hanging clothes on the clothesline. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Jack, what's that?" "Face, did something happen?" Jack told his mother everything from the job offer to the eviction threat. Martha listened in silence, her hands trembling slightly as she held the clothes. "Mom, is it true that our house is on the colonel's land?" Martha sighed deeply before answering. "Jack, your father bought this house when you were a baby, but at the time we didn't have the money to properly register the deed. After your father passed away, I never managed to save enough money to regularize the papers. I always thought it wouldn't be a problem, but the colonel took advantage to register the land in his name," Jack completed, understanding the situation. "It seems so, my son." That night, Jack stayed awake beside Windrunner, stroking the animal and reflecting on his decision. Giving up the race would mean security for his mother, but it would also mean abandoning his dreams and betraying the trust that Windrunner had placed in him. "What would you do in my place, Windrunner?" he whispered to the horse. Windrunner whinnied softly and touched Jack's face with his muzzle, as if trying to give him strength. At that moment, Jack made his decision. No matter the consequences, he would not abandon Windrunner or his dreams, even if it cost him everything he had. Saturday dawned with a sky laden with dark clouds that seemed to mirror the tension that had taken over Fairview. Jack woke before dawn, as had become his custom, but this time it wasn't just to care for Windrunner. The weight of the decision he had made the night before still echoed in his chest. "Good morning, my friend," he whispered to Windrunner, who immediately approached and rested his head on his shoulder. "Tomorrow is the big day. Are we ready?" Windrunner whinnied softly, a sound that no longer carried the melancholy of the first days. There was strength in that voice, a determination that made the animal's eyes shine with an intensity that Jack hadn't seen since the first day he received him. "Jack, are you sure about your decision?" asked Martha, approaching with a steaming cup of coffee. She had spent the entire night in vigil, praying and thinking about the consequences that awaited them. "Mum, I can't abandon Windrunner now. Look at him. He trusts me, and I promised him we would prove our worth. I know, my son, and I support you, even knowing the risks. But Jack, if we lose this house, where will we go?" "We'll figure something out, Mum. We always have. And who knows what maybe tomorrow will be different from what everyone expects." Old Frank arrived early, carrying a bag with special herbs and a jar of clay. "Today is the last day of preparation, Jack. We're going to make Windrunner completely remember who he is," said the old trainer with determination. "I brought some herbs that my grandfather used on the eve of big races. They give energy and awaken instincts." While old Frank prepared a special mixture of herbs to massage Windrunner's legs, Jack noticed movement across the street. Several people were passing in front of the house, some stopping to observe the horse, others making comments he preferred not to hear. "Look at the famous Windrunner," said a lady with irony. "Still skinny, but at least he's not falling sideways anymore." "Poor Jack, he doesn't know the trouble he's gotten himself and his mother into," commented another. "I heard the colonel has already sent notice that after tomorrow they have to vacate the house," whispered a third voice. Jack clenched his fists but remained focused on caring for Windrunner. The horse, as if feeling the tension in the environment, positioned himself between Jack and the people on the street, as if wanting to protect him from curious glances and malicious comments. "This horse has pride," observed old Frank. "Look how he positions himself. He's defending you, Jack. That's a sign that the partnership between you is strong." During the afternoon, something unexpected happened. Windrunner, who until then had shown apathy towards other horses, began to whinny in the direction of the Morgan Ranch. It wasn't a whinny of pain or sadness, but something different, almost challenging. "What's happening to him?" asked Jack, intrigued. "Jack, this horse is remembering who he is," explained old Frank with his eyes shining. "Champion horses have long memories. He's smelling the other horses, hearing the sounds from the ranch, and that's awakening the competitor that exists inside him." Windrunner began to circle the small yard, no longer limping, but with decisive and proud steps. His posture had completely changed. The raised neck, the high head, the more fluid movements. It was as if a transformation was happening before everyone's eyes. "My goodness," murmured Martha. "He looks like a different horse." "No, Mum, he's back to being the horse he always was," corrected Jack, moved. In the afternoon, when Jack returned from work, he found a surprise waiting for him. Rachel Morgan was talking with his mother at the gate of the house, and for the first time, she wasn't hidden or disguised. "Rachel told me everything, Jack," said Martha, "about the help she's been giving, about how she knew Windrunner." "Jack, I came here because I need to tell you something important," Rachel said with urgency in her voice. "My father doesn't know I'm here, and if he finds out, he'll be furious. But I can't let you enter this race without knowing the complete truth." "What truth?" "Last night I overheard my father talking with the other farmers. They're planning something to ensure you don't have any chance of doing well in the race." Jack felt a chill down his spine. "What do you mean?" "They're going to try to scare Windrunner at the starting line. They'll make noise, shout, maybe even throw things. They want him to bolt or balk before the race even begins. But that's cheating. Yes, but no one will be able to prove it. It will look like a natural reaction from the crowd. Jack, they want to turn tomorrow into a complete public humiliation." Old Frank, who had heard the conversation, shook his head angrily. "This doesn't surprise me. But Jack, now that we know, we can prepare." "How?" "A horse that was once a champion has experience with crowds. The problem is that Windrunner has lost that confidence. But if we can make him remember—" Old Frank made a thoughtful pause. "I have an idea." The old trainer approached Windrunner and began to make a rhythmic noise by clapping his hands, then shouted some commands that Jack didn't understand. Windrunner immediately changed his posture, assuming a racing position, with tense muscles and alert ears. "Those were the commands Elizabeth used with him in races," explained Rachel, moved. "He remembers. Jack, tomorrow, no matter what noise they make, you use these commands. Windrunner will know it's time to show those who have forgotten who the real champion of this town is." When night fell, Jack spent his last hours before the race beside Windrunner. The horse was restless, but not from nervousness. It was contained energy, as if he knew that the moment of truth had arrived. "Tomorrow we'll show them all, Windrunner. No matter what happens, we'll run with dignity." Windrunner whinnied once, strong and clear, a sound that echoed through the quiet night of Fairview like a war cry. For the first time in years, the former champion was ready to return to the track. Sunday dawned with a radiant sun, cutting through the dark clouds of the previous day, as if the sky itself wanted to illuminate the big day. Since sunrise, the key town of Fairview had been buzzing with an excitement not seen in years. The annual race always attracted people from neighboring towns, but this time it seemed the entire region had mobilized to witness the spectacle, or what many expected would be a great humiliation. Jack woke up even before the rooster crowed. His nerves were on edge, but when he looked at Windrunner, he found the horse in perfect calm, as if he were just waiting for the moment to show the world who he really was. "Good morning, champion," said Jack, and for the first time he used that word without irony. Windrunner truly looked like a champion that morning. His coat gleamed in the sun, his muscles were defined, and his eyes carried a determination that made Jack's heart beat faster. "Jack, are you ready?" asked Martha, approaching with a cup of strong coffee and a warm bread roll. "As ready as I can be, Mum. My son, regardless of what happens today, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Few men would have the courage to do what you're doing." Old Frank arrived carrying a finely crafted leather saddle that Jack had never seen before. "Where did this saddle come from?" he asked curiously. It was Elizabeth's. Rachel brought it to me last night, after you talked. She said her stepmother would want Windrunner to compete with it one more time. Jack ran his hands over the soft, intricately worked leather saddle. Windrunner, seeing the object, whinnied softly and approached, as if recognizing an old friend. He remembers it, Jack murmured emotionally. At 10 o'clock in the morning, Fairview's central square was completely packed. Improvised grandstands had been set up around the racecourse, and people crowded at windows, on rooftops, and anywhere that offered a good view of the competition. "Here comes Jack with his champion," someone shouted from the crowd as they saw him arriving. The yee. Comments were far from encouraging. "Look at that, he actually came. There's still time to give up, boy." Poor horse going to be embarrassed too, but there were also voices of support, mainly from the humbler people of the town. "Go, Jack. Show them. We believe in you. Windrunner, you can do it." In the starting area, 5 other horses were already positioned with their riders. They were all magnificent animals, pure Arabian horses, with defined muscles, impeccable coats, and aristocratic bearing. Their owners, wealthy farmers from the region, looked at Jack and Windrunner with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "So this is the famous challenger," said one of the riders, eliciting laughter from the others. "I hope he at least completes the first lap before giving up." Jack ignored the comments and focused on calming Windrunner, who had become a bit nervous with the noisy crowd. He used the gentle commands that old Frank had taught him, based on those that Elizabeth used to use. "Easy, Windrunner. Remember who you are," he whispered in the horse's ear. From across the square, Colonel Hank observed everything from his privileged position in the main grandstand. His face showed no emotion, but his hands tightly gripped the railing in front of him. Rachel sat beside him, visibly tense and silently rooting for Jack and Windrunner. "Riders, prepare for the start," shouted the race judge. Then exactly what Rachel had predicted began. Several men in the crowd started making excessive noise, shouting and clapping in a coordinated manner, clearly trying to frighten Windrunner. Some even threw small pebbles in the horse's direction. For a moment, Windrunner seemed confused and frightened. His ears moved nervously, and he took a few steps backward. The crowd laughed loudly, thinking the plan had worked. But then Jack remembered the special commands that old Frank had taught him. He leaned over Windrunner's neck and spoke the exact words that Elizabeth used to use. "Let's fly, my prince. It's time to show who you are." The effect was instantaneous and surprising. Windrunner completely stopped moving, raised his head proudly, and assumed a racing posture that even impressed the other riders. His eyes shone with an intensity not seen in years, and he whinnied once, strong and clear, as if accepting the challenge. The crowd fell silent for a few seconds, surprised by the sudden transformation of the horse. "Riders, to your mark," shouted the judge. The 6 horses lined up at the starting line. Jack felt his heart beating so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Windrunner was completely still, but Jack could feel the contained energy in the animal, like a compressed spring ready to leap. "Ready!" The silence was total for an instant that seemed eternal. "Go!" The shot echoed through the square, and the 6 horses bolted like arrows. To everyone's surprise, Windrunner didn't lag behind. He left the starting line together with the others, his hooves hitting the ground with a force and rhythm that many in the crowd hadn't heard in years. At the first turn, Windrunner was in 4th place, maintaining a steady pace, while some of the favored horses had already begun to pull ahead. But Jack could feel that his horse was just warming up, finding his own rhythm. "Come on, Windrunner. You can do it," he shouted, and for the first time in a long time he truly believed his own words. The race had begun, and against all expectations, Windrunner was truly competing. The crowd that had come to witness a humiliation now watched, mouths agape, the rebirth of a legend. On the steep climb that marked the most difficult point of the course, Windrunner began to show why he had been called a champion. While the other horses slowed their pace on the incline, he maintained his speed, his hind legs propelling him upward with a force that seemed to come from an inexhaustible source of determination. Halfway through the race, when the horses passed the second turn, something extraordinary began to happen. Windrunner, who until then had maintained a steady pace in 4th place, started to accelerate in a way that made the crowd rise from the grandstands. "Look at that!" someone shouted. "The horse is gaining speed." Jack felt the change in the animal beneath him. It was as if an ancestral force had awakened in Windrunner's muscles. Each stride was more powerful than the last, and his gallop gained a fluidity that Jack had never experienced before. "That's it, Windrunner. Show them who you are," shouted Jack, and his voice mixed with the growing roar of the crowd. On the descent leading to the third turn, Windrunner overtook the third-place rider with an ease that even impressed the opposing riders. The Arabian horse that had been passed whinnied loudly, as if greeting a worthy old rival. "It's not possible," muttered Colonel Hank, rising from his seat in the grandstand. His hands trembled slightly as he watched Windrunner approach the second-place rider. Rachel, beside her father, had tears in her eyes. "Dad, he's remembering," she said with a choked voice. "Windrunner is remembering when he used to race with Mom." The crowd, Martha held old Frank's hands, both so moved they could barely speak. "That horse is a miracle," murmured the old trainer. "I knew he had it in him, but seeing it happen, it's like watching a resurrection." With just one lap to go before the finish, Windrunner was in second place, right behind Thunder, the favorite horse of the richest farmer in the region. But instead of looking tired, Windrunner was showing an energy that seemed to multiply with each meter covered. Then the moment that no one expected happened. On the final turn, Windrunner stumbled. The crowd let out a collective cry of horror. For an instant that seemed like an eternity. The horse appeared about to fall, unbalanced and drastically losing speed. Jack felt his heart stop, and many in the grandstand were already standing up thinking it was all over. "No, Windrunner." "Don't give up now," shouted Jack, holding the reins firmly but not forcing the horse. But then, in a movement that made time slow down in the eyes of all present, Windrunner raised his head, arched his neck, and his eyes shone with an intensity that cut through the air like lightning. It was as if he were hearing Elizabeth's voice whispering in his ears, reminding him of all the victories they had won together. With a burst of strength that surprised even Jack, Windrunner completely recovered and resumed the race with a speed that seemed impossible for a horse that had stumbled seconds before. "My God!" shouted old Frank. "He didn't give up. Look how he's running." The crowd exploded in shouts of surprise and admiration. People who had come to ridicule were now standing, cheering and shouting Windrunner's name. "Go, Windrunner! You can do it! Show them who the real champion is." In the final stretch, Windrunner was side by side with Thunder. The two horses were running as if their lives depended on it, but there was something different in Windrunner's gallop. It wasn't just speed. It was pure determination, dignity, and pride of one who was proving that he had never lost his essence. Jack looked to the side and saw Thunder's rider forcing his horse beyond the limit, using spurs and a whip. But Jack didn't need to force Windrunner. The horse was running of his own will, driven by something much greater than simple competition. 50 yards from the finish line, Windrunner took the lead. The crowd went wild. People who had never cheered for anything in their lives were shouting until they were hoarse. Martha was openly crying, and even some of the farmers who had come to mock were applauding. "He's going to win," shouted Rachel, no longer able to contain her tears. "Windrunner is going to win." But it was when looking at Colonel Hank that Jack had the biggest surprise of all. The man who had been his antagonist, who had plotted his humiliation, was standing with tears streaming down his face, shouting, "Go, Windrunner! Go, my old friend!" In that moment, Jack understood the truth. The colonel hadn't given Windrunner to him out of cruelty. He had given him because he couldn't bear to see the last link to his wife wasting away in abandonment. Subconsciously, he had hoped that someone could bring life back to the horse that had been his late wife's joy. Windrunner crossed the finish, line 3 yards ahead of Thunder. The crowd exploded in an ovation that echoed throughout Fairview. People ran to the track, lifting Jack and Windrunner as heroes. The horse, breathless but with eyes shining with pride, accepted the affection from the crowd as if he had never forgotten what it was like to be loved. "Champion! Champion! Champion!" the crowd chanted in unison. Colonel Hank came down from the grandstand and approached Jack and Windrunner. His expression was no longer one of arrogance, but of deep emotion. "Jack," he said with a choked voice, "you did something I couldn't do. You brought my old friend back to life." "Colonel, No. Need to say anything, boy. I know what I did to you. I know about the threats, the blackmail. But you taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Sometimes you need to believe in the impossible to make miracles happen." The colonel approached Windrunner and stroked his neck affectionately. "Hello, old friend. You showed us all that you never lost your greatness. Elizabeth would be proud." Windrunner whinnied softly, a sound that seemed to carry forgiveness and understanding. "Jack, the deed to your house will be transferred to your mother's name first thing tomorrow. You'll never have to worry about that again. And if you want, there's a place for you and Windrunner at my ranch. Not as an employee, but as a partner." Rachel approached, radiant with happiness. "Jack, you did something wonderful. You brought Windrunner back, but more than that, you brought hope back to all of us." That afternoon, as the sun set over Fairview, Jack walked home beside Windrunner. The horse no longer limped, no longer trembled, no longer had that sad and lost look. He was once again the champion he had always been. "You know, Windrunner," said Jack, stroking the animal's neck, "today we didn't just win a race, we won the respect of an entire town. But more important than that, we proved that when someone believes in us, we can be much more than others imagine." Windrunner whinnied one last time, a cheerful sound full of life that echoed down the quiet street, like a promise that some dreams, even the most impossible ones, can come true when they find brave hearts willing to fight for them. The race was over, but the true victory of Jack and Windrunner was just beginning. They had proved that greatness is not in what others see in us, but in what we are capable of awakening when someone truly believes in our potential. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like.